Well, Eylon Levy joins us now, the former Israeli government spokesperson, and Dan Perry, former chief editor for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East for the Associated Press. Thank you both for joining us, especially on this breaking news. I wanted to ask you first, Dan, what do you make of the latest U.S. strikes on Iran that our colleague Robert Sherman was just talking about?
It's a very volatile situation. You could look at this, to paraphrase von Clausewitz, as negotiations by another means, because the talks don't seem to be going anywhere. But it also clearly is dangerous, and Iran might overplay its hand. I assess they have been overplaying their hand in the negotiations themselves. The U.S. has abandoned almost all its war goals. Iran should take yes for an answer, and instead we heard their ambassador to China just this week insisting that they're going to charge us blackmail toll, which is basically completely illegal under international law. I think Trump at this point is being made to look so ridiculous that he can't sign the MOU the way, or a deal based on the MOU the way things are looking. Neither do I believe he wants to resume the war before the midterms. So I imagine they're going to drag out the talks. We're going to see continued flare-ups, as we are seeing right now, and a real possibility of a resumption either of the war or of a crippling blockade of Iran immediately after the vote in November.
And Dan, how do you see that impacting the peace talks?
It really depends on Iran. I mean, as I say, the U.S. is no longer asking for anything resembling reforms in Iran. There's no more talk of bringing down the regime. There's talk of giving them hundreds of billions of dollars, in effect, strengthening the regime. It's astonishing to me, frankly, that the Iranians aren't making it easy for Trump to just sign on the dotted line, and even giving him some lip service on the nuclear issue, which seems insanely to be all he really wants. Or, on the other hand, the Iranians indeed are master negotiators. That can't be taken away from them, and all of this might just be brinksmanship. We will simply have to wait and see.
Eylon, I want to get to you. The president is in Turkey for this NATO summit, as we said, expressing his frustration over allies not really coming to the U.S. aid when he was going through this war in Iran. How do you see them reacting to this? Do you think they'll step in here? What do you think their reaction will be, especially to this latest round of strikes as well?
President Trump is right to be upset with NATO allies that did absolutely nothing to help against the Iranian regime. Frankly, NATO, the whole Western world, should have seen the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz as an act of war and committed forces to open the Strait of Hormuz, because it was an act of war against the global economy and an attempt to hold the whole global economy hostage. Instead, America's NATO allies said, well, America, you broke it, you fix it. And that sent a message to Iran that blockading the Strait of Hormuz works, because the United States was left alone together with Israel to pressure Iran to open it. America decided there were limits to military force. And so here we see the Iranian regime continuing to block the Strait of Hormuz, continuing to attack ships because they want to hold the global economy hostage, force countries to pay a bribe in order to get their ships through, and they realize that blockading the Strait of Hormuz works.
There is something that the president may resume selling to Turkey in this conversation at the NATO summit, talking about resuming the sale of F-35s to Turkey. And that's something that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been very outspoken about, saying that cannot happen because it could destabilize the region more. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Why does Israel feel strongly that that cannot happen, and what would that mean for the situation in the Middle East?
It's not just Israel that feels strongly about the sale of F-35 jets to Turkey, it's much of Congress. Let's remember, the administration is not allowed under U.S. law to sell F-35 jets to Turkey. And that's because Turkey is a Trojan horse in NATO that is playing both sides. It bought and maintains Russia's S-400 missile defense system. That means selling the F-35 jets to Turkey puts in danger America's most advanced fighter jets, because it exposes them to Russian defense technologies.
And Dan, what do you make of the president's trip here to Turkey for the NATO summit? What do you think some of the takeaways could be here for the United States?
Well, the main thing is, of course, as Eylon was saying, this reckless idea of selling F-35s to Turkey. Given the context that has been discussed, this would basically risk eliminating America's superiority in the skies. And next time, perhaps they're trying to establish control of the skies over Iran, another Russian client state with air defenses, we could find our planes being shot out of the sky. It is absolutely outrageous. But the bigger issue is if we are contemplating the idea of a return to some form of warfare against Iran, either kinetic warfare or a blockade that this time I would imagine might be more total, land, air, and sea, perhaps, then we're going to need the European allies on side. Now, Trump slightly misunderstands NATO. It's a defense alliance. Article 5 doesn't obligate everyone to join a fellow member states attack, but rather to see an attack on one as an attack on all. But on the other hand, even though Europe is not obligated to follow America's lead and Israel's in attacking Iran, of course, they did not exactly cover themselves in glory, and they're looking foolish. And I think they're feeling foolish. So what they can offer Trump, who they famously want to manage, is promises on the 5% spending goal of GDP on defense, so they can basically, come closer to taking care of their own defense, because America defending Europe 80 years after World War II is a little silly. But mainly to quietly assure that if what indeed is an Iranian declaration of war on the global economy turns out to be real, and they're serious about this bribe that they're going to charge through the Strait of Hormuz, then they need to find themselves at war with the entire Western alliance. The challenge is that the Western alliance is basically an alliance of democratic countries, and Trump is attracted to authoritarians, and this puts the whole thing a little bit out of balance. But let us hope that they set things right, because this situation with Iran should focus everyone's minds on the essence.
A lot of ground to cover there. Thank you both for your insight. A fascinating conversation. We'll have to leave it there. Eylon Levy, Dan Perry,
Thank you.
Thank you.